Welcome to the Autonomous Dave podcast. Today's episode is going to be about choosing land out in Joshua Tree, and we're going to go over, if there's Joshua trees on your property, what you should do, deciding between a remote lot versus an infill lot, bringing utilities to your site, doing the site visit in person. We're going to briefly talk about the native vegetation out there, a preservation approach. We're going to discuss fire, flood, and earthquake hazards and how you can get those maps, hazard overlay maps. And the last step, what is a good deal for a land purchase? How do you know it's a good price? So the best way to see if there's Joshua trees on your property is to go do a site visit, and ideally you would actually have an arborist with you. And I kind of outlined the importance of doing this in my previous episode, You Need an Arborist, so go check that video out. I'll leave a link in the description. I would just say in general, my experience out there in Joshua Tree is most of the density of the Joshua trees is on the south side of the 62 as you're kind of heading towards the national park. For me, I've noticed there's more density of Joshua trees. And as you go north of the 62, further north, the shrubs are lower, the Joshua trees are more spaced out. There's definitely still Joshua trees, but that's just been my very general observation in the area. So I think the first question is, what size of lot do you want? Do you want to be close to the town, or do you want to be remote? There's pros and cons to each. The beauty of just kind of being out in the desert, you can really rejuvenate, no distractions. The challenges of having a remote lot, are bringing utilities, water and utilities to the site, and also access. There's a lot of dirt roads out there, so sometimes it could be hard without four-wheel drive to get to some of these more remote lots. So it's just something to think about is access via roads. Is it paved or is it dirt? The other thing to think about when selecting a lot out in Joshua Tree is the proximity to Joshua Tree National Park. In my personal opinion, I think anything in Joshua Tree is close enough to the national park. Even if you're in one of the more remote properties on the north side of the 62, I don't think that would be a reason for me. If you're going for the remoteness of the lot, I think you're still close enough to Joshua Tree National Park. So it's not a huge factor, and you'll notice that in general the prices, the closer you are to the national park entrance, the price of the lot is more expensive. So you're always balancing costs. So it also depends on what your budget is. So you'd be surprised how tight a half-acre parcel is if you have Joshua trees on your property that you're trying to work around, and you also need to plan for a leach field and a septic tank. You quickly run out of space. The half-acre parcels are pretty challenging if you have Joshua trees on the property that you have to work around. If I were to do my project again, I would probably try to get at least a 1-acre parcel. It'd be a lot easier to fit things, to fit the septic tank, have a little bit bigger house, and to be able to have more flexibility with where the house is located. So I think bringing utilities to your site, one of the things is if it's a more remote parcel, you might be paying to actually have the utility company extend their water main, and you can find out those prices. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can locate what the cost to extend the main water line is, and also some information on bringing power to your site. I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. One thing to keep in mind, if you do see a water meter green box on your site, that doesn't mean that there's an actual water meter installed. So that's one thing that you'll notice. If you're looking for vacant land, you'll notice that on Zillow. If you're looking on those types of websites, they'll often have pictures that say water meter already paid for. But if you actually go on site, open that box, and if there's not an actual water meter in there, it has not been paid for or it has not been installed. So with my project out in Joshua Tree, I'm going all electric, so I don't have any gas. And if you do want some kind of natural gas, you actually have to have a tank installed that needs to be refilled every so often. With all of the California energy requirements, if you're doing new construction out there, you actually need to start doing solar is mandatory now, and I think going electric is also more sustainable. So I would just recommend that if you are designing a new house out there, to just go all electric, integrate solar panels into your design. So I think the septic requirements out there, what I did for my project was basically a leach field design. So I have a 1,000 gallon septic tank and a leach field that is approximately 120 linear feet. I think the main thing with the septic design is, honestly, it has to do with the native vegetation out there and just all the grading that needs to happen to install it. So make sure you don't have any Joshua trees in the way of your leach field or your septic tank area, because that area will have to be basically clear cut. So just make sure that when you're walking your site, there's a good area and you can fit the septic tank and the leach field. So if you're looking for land, one of the things that's kind of hard to understand is the views. The desert out there, this is actually the high desert area, and there's a lot of like gradual slopes, and it's really hard to see from Google Street View or Google Earth what kind of view you're gonna have. I think you'll be surprised at just some of the parcels. Maybe on Google Street View it feels like it's pretty flat, but when you're actually out there, you can see pretty far, and you could actually, the further you get away from the freeway, if you go to the south, you're actually pretty high, and I think it's good to go in person and see what kind of view you have. You could have view of the nearby rocks from the Joshua Tree National Park. There's also other mountains in the distance. You can even see snow-covered mountains. So see what kind of view your property has. I think one of the beautiful things about Joshua Tree is just all the native vegetation out there. Check out my other video, You Need an Arborist. The arborist actually pointed out all these other plant species, and she was talking about like, hey, you can't get this at the store, it's in the way, so let's really transplant it. But a lot of these you can't buy them in their wild form. They just look different. The native species look different from the store-bought ones. So I highly recommend that try to preserve as much of the native vegetation as you can, and work with an arborist to come up with a transplanting and a protection in place plan. One of the other things you'll notice when you're out there is just, you'll see, if your vacant lot has not been cleared, if there's a lot of native vegetation on the site, you're going to notice a lot of wildlife, especially the bunnies, the jackrabbits, the coyotes. And there's something nice about the density of the native vegetation out there. So I would highly recommend that you really try to imagine what the house is going to look like out there, and how that house is going to work with the native vegetation. How much of that can you preserve? Can you come up with a plan with the arborist and with the grading contractor, with your contractor, to really save some of these pockets? That's what we're trying to do at my property, and it's quite difficult because just the logistics of the equipment for the grading equipment and stuff. So I'll definitely share with you how that turns out. It's definitely a negotiation between the arborist, myself, and the grading contractor. It's a negotiation of, can I keep this pocket of vegetation here? Do I need to transplant it? How much area do you need to work with your equipment, your excavation equipment? Where is a grader going to be dumping soil and all that kind of stuff? So the Joshua Tree area is a pretty unforgiving climate and area in terms of hazards. So there's flood hazards out there, there's fire hazards, and earthquake hazards. So there's definitely areas of Joshua Tree that are considered a flood hazard, and these are the lower elevations. In general, the closer you are to the freeway, that's kind of just north of the freeway, there is a low area where a lot of the water runoff tends to go. You can actually see traces of it on Google Earth, but the best way to look at the flood hazard maps is actually online, and I'll leave a link in the description where you can see some of the flood hazard overlay maps, and this may impact your insurance rate. And also, me personally, I just wouldn't select a piece of land that is in a flood zone. In terms of fire hazards, There are specific areas in Joshua Tree that are in a fire hazard overlay, and what this means is you will have to comply with some of the certain materials on the exterior of your building. So exposed wood, in general, exposed wood is not permitted. It'll also if you're in a fire hazard overlay, you might be required to upgrade your windows to tempered windows. So the other hazard that's important to be aware of, earthquake hazard, and this is something that your structural engineer will be able to tell you more about, but it can affect the foundation design of the house. Also, if you're doing an unconventional foundation system, so depending on what kind of earthquake hazard zone you're in, what the seismic activity of your area is, it may trigger a few things. It may require you to get a soils report if you are doing a certain area, and it also might affect your foundation design, which might increase the cost of your house if you need to basically beef up the foundation system of your house. So you definitely want to get a real estate agent who's familiar with the area, preferably somebody who often works with land deals. So I think the next episode I really want to dive into working with a real estate agent. Hey, so quick update on my project. This week I was supposed to be breaking ground, but unfortunately I need to get a surveyor out there to first stake all the corners of the property, stake all the corners of the proposed house, and also set an elevation benchmark so the grading contractor knows exactly how much dirt to excavate. So that has basically delayed breaking ground by a week or maybe even 2 weeks. I'm still trying to get the surveyor scheduled, have them send me a proposal. It sounds like the original surveyor that did my original surveying a few years ago either retired or went out of business or something. So I'm basically trying to get a new surveyor on board, all signed up and scheduled to come out on my site. So if you liked this video today, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe. I'm trying to post a video every week, and I'll keep sharing with you the project I have out there and also everything that I went through to get to this point, and really share with you the process that I went through so you can learn from my mistakes, my successes and failures. So I hope I can continue to share this journey with you. Please leave a comment in the description. Tell me about your project and what kind of struggles you're going through.